Welcome back, scholars. Let's go ahead and jump right into today's lesson. This is Module 2, Cycle 9, Lesson 42.
Materials!
Go ahead and put on that thinking cap for today. You will definitely need it. Let's read our learning targets. Follow along with the first one. I can retell the events from the current edition of the Sunnyside Gazette. Local student wins city spelling bee. The second one says, I can read the irregularly spelled high-frequency words. Finally, one, friend, and one. And that last learning target says, I can read the decodable text, the spelling bee.
Transition song.
Gather round together, together, together. It's time to hear a story, a story, a story. It's time to hear a story and say what you've learned.
Read aloud.
We'll spend a moment here reading today's edition of the Sunnyside Gazette. Listen carefully as I read so that you're able to answer questions afterwards. Sunnyside Gazette, Edition 9, Local Student Wins City Spelling Bee by Tina Tipster. Over 20 students from across the city competed last night in the City Spelling Bee held at the Trove Public Library. Local news anchor Brad Cast emceed the event. The competition began at 7 p.m. After 20 rounds, only 2 participants remained: Sunnyside residents Nell Nash and James Lewis. The final winner was James, who correctly spelled the word hummingbird after Nell forgot to include 2 M's in the middle of the word. After winning, James said, I am so glad that my grandma and my little sister Patricia were here to see me win. I want to congratulate Nell. She is my friend and she did a great job too. James will advance to the state spelling bee in Capital City next month. He will compete for the chance to attend the National Spelling Bee in Washington, D.C. Wow, what an exciting article!
Question and answer.
Let's talk about what we've just heard. I have some questions for you, and if you were listening carefully, I know you'll be able to answer them. What competition was held last night at the library? That's right, it was the City Spelling Bee. Who was the winner? Yes, it was James. How many students competed in the spelling bee? You've got it. There were 20 students. The text said that James will advance to the state spelling bee. What does that mean, advance? He will get to compete in the next round of the spelling bee. He gets to move on. Great listening. I can tell you're working hard to comprehend the text.
Word work.
Now that we've heard the engagement text, it's time to take a look at some of our snap and trap words. Remember, snap words play fair. They use the spelling patterns that we would expect them to, while trap words don't play fair. They have something tricky about them. Let's take a look at this first word, even. What do you notice? I hear the long E at the beginning, even. And I hear a short E in the second syllable. That seems right. For an open and closed syllable, that word is a snap. Try this next word, one. Un. It sounds like a short U, but I noticed the letter O in this word. That is a trap. Here comes another word. What do you think about this word, wrong? I see ong spelled O-N-G. That's right. And I notice that familiar pattern when we see a W coming right before the letter R, it's silent. We're familiar with both patterns, so that word is a snap. Here's the word friend. What do you think about that one? Yes, that one is tricky. We hear the short E sound in the middle, but I notice I and E together. That word is a trap.
Fluency.
We're going to finish off by practicing our fluency as we read the decodable book, The Spelling Bee. James had not always been a good speller, but he worked hard to get better. He dreamed of winning the spelling bee. He was so happy when his teacher chose him to go to the city spelling bee. Tonight was the big night. Grandma made James wear a tie for the spelling bee. He tugged at the tie on his neck as he spelled words in his head. He was ready. He and the other kids walked out on the stage to begin the spelling bee. There were so many people there to watch them. They all clapped as the kids walked out on stage. James sat on the stage with the other kids. He saw his sister Pat and Grandma sitting in the front row. Pat was still clapping. James grinned. The spelling bee began, and James was getting all the words right. Other kids were spelling words wrong, so they had to leave the stage. Finally, only James and his friend Nell were left. It was Nell's turn. A teacher read the word to her. She spelled it wrong. James stopped to think about the word. Then he spelled it. He was right. James won the spelling bee. James almost tripped as he walked over to the teacher. She said, "James is the winner." James grinned. He was sad for Nell, but still very happy he won. The people clapped and clapped. He went to where Grandma and Pat were sitting. Grandma patted his head, then kissed his cheek. Pat hugged him very hard. They were all filled with joy. James had worked so hard, and he had won. Thanks for reading with me.
Closing reflection.
How did you take responsibility for your learning today? Did you listen carefully and work hard to answer the questions about the spelling bee? You did a great job listening and reading today. Keep it up. You worked really hard today. You should be proud of yourself. I'll see you next time.